Hello everyone, if you are new to Unreal Engine 5, then this tutorial is for you. In this tutorial, we go from knowing nothing about Unreal Engine 5 to creating this game you see right here. So as we can see on the top right hand corner, we have a timer, and the goal of this game is very simple. Basically, we're just trying to hit all the targets that are in the world before the counter hits 0. So it's basically a competition against a timer. And then we have one more left, so it's 4 out of 5. And now we're 5 out of 5, and we get a win screen. We also get a restart button. That's how the player can restart and replay the game if they really want to. So it's a very simple game. We're going to be going over the basics of programming and specifically blueprints. So it's very important to know that I have another Unreal Engine 5 beginner tutorial series that is 5 hours long, but it focuses more so on the environmental aspect of Unreal Engine 5, while this one focuses on the programming aspect of Unreal Engine 5. So I recommend that you do check out that video before watching this one, but if you don't, that is completely fine. We do start from scratch within this tutorial. Also, if you did watch the 5-hour long tutorial, then you're going to want to skip ahead about 17 minutes into this video because we are going to repeat some of the fundamentals, some of the basics of Unreal Engine. So with all that being said, let's start programming. So first we are going to download Unreal Engine 5. You could download it through the Epic Games launcher you could get from their website. And simply come to the UE5 tab and click on download. When you are done downloading, if we come into library, we can see that we have right here Unreal Engine 5, and we can press launch. Or if you don't want to go through the Epic Games launcher, we can click on the drop down and click on create shortcuts. This will create a desktop shortcut, and then we can double click on it right here to open it that way. Keep in mind, Unreal Engine 5 is currently in early access, so if you're following along with this tutorial, you can expect some glitches and maybe some changes in the future. If the changes are big enough, then this tutorial will be remade, so double check in the description that I haven't already remade this tutorial if you're watching in the far future. So this is what we should see when you open up Unreal Engine for the first time. As we can see, we have a list of all of our different projects. Now your projects are probably going to be empty right now, but we can create a new project by coming over here. So right here we have a collection of different templates. Now of course our template will be located in games. And of course, we're going to be building on top of the first-person shooter template. Epic Games is nice enough to include a bunch of templates that will help us get started with whatever project we are trying to create. And then down here, we have a bunch of defaults we can set. So I'm going to uncheck starter content and uncheck ray tracing and make sure that I have blueprints and not C++ selected, since we will be using Blueprint for our video game. And then down here, we can set a project location. I like where it's set right now. That is my desktop. And then we can name my project. So I'm going to go ahead, let's name this first game and press create. We can see that my project just opened up, but also on the left here, we have a folder that was created. If I double click on this folder, we'll see all the different data that make up my project. And if I, let's say, exit out of my project right here, to open up my project again, all I have to do is navigate to my project folder and double click on the executable with my project name. So that's one way of opening up the project without having to go through the Epic Games launcher. So keep in mind, we're going to go over the very fundamentals of Unreal Engine, so the user interface and the viewport right here. So if you already watched the Unreal Engine 5 beginner tutorial, the long one, then you can skip ahead to the blueprint part. But for everyone who hasn't, I'll just briefly go over what you see right here. So of course, in the middle, we have our 3D viewport. The viewport is simply a window into our world from which we can fly around, grab objects, move around, and create a level. And then to the right of this, we have the details panel. Details panel allows us to edit the properties of objects I have selected within my level. And keep in mind, I'll go over how to navigate and the viewport in just a bit. And above that, we have the world outliner. Now the world outliner is, of course, just a collection, a list of all the different objects that are in your world. So this is another way to select objects without having to select them right in the viewport. And above everything here, we have our toolbar. So our toolbar is a collection of very useful tools. We can see right here that we can switch in between different modes. So let's say if I want to create a landscape, I click on the landscape icon right here, and now I'm in landscape editing mode, or I could go into foliage and paint some foliage and so on. We also have different shortcuts. So Shift 2, we can quickly switch in between our different modes. So Shift 1 is the default mode, which is place actors. Shift 2, landscape, 3, foliage, and so on. So I'll just go back, pressing Shift 1 to our place actors mode. And then we have the play button. If I press play, we can see that now I am walking around my world. We are playing in-game in editor. And we can use WASD keys to move, space to jump. And I'm going to shoot a ball. And they'll just fire just like that. So by default, we won't have first person. The reason why we have our first person character here is because we selected the first person template. So Unreal already has a bunch of content in here for us. I'm going to press escape to exit out of play mode. And right next to play, we have platforms. This is where you would compile and build your game for final product. So this is where you come in and build it for Windows or for Mac, iOS, and so on. So we won't be going over how to build and compile your game within this tutorial. And to the far left, we see we have a bunch of other drop downs. So you could create cinematics, blueprints, which we will go over in just a bit because this is the point of the tutorial. And then we can have the crate where we can drag in new objects. I'll go over that in just a bit. And you might be wondering, where do I get new content? Where can I see pretty much all the assets that make up my project? And that is with Control and Space within the content drawer. The content drawer, especially right here, we can see all these folders are what currently make up my project. So we're going to be creating new assets, editing assets, and all of this is all the data that my Unreal Engine project is using. So all your levels, materials, programming are stored within the content drawer. So we can press Control and Space to bring it up just like this. Or we can press the content drawer button right there, bottom left-hand corner. If you don't want to always have to press Control and Space to bring it up, we can click on Dock and Layout just like that, which will move my content drawer to the bottom. And that's how we don't have to press Control and Space if I want to quickly navigate through and grab an asset. Also, if you forgot to select first person template, you can always come to Add, scroll up, go to Add Feature or Content Pack, and then select the first person template from here. So right now there's a glitch and the first person template isn't here, so it should be here in a future update, so you should see it. I'll just exit out right there. Now, before we can move on how to fly around in our world and move objects, I just have to quickly go over how we can customize the user interface. So we see that we have all these tabs right here. If I left click hold, I could drag my tab around and just dock it wherever I like. So let's say if I prefer my details pane over here, I can move it right there and scale windows just like this. I can also come up to a tab and right click on it and then go to collapse to tab well. That will just hide my tab. So let's say if this tab is taking up too much space, right click, collapse to tab well. And if you want that tab back, we can click on the little blue triangle top left hand corner. Also, I can move this details panel. So let's right click it and I can move my tabs to the sidebar. So now that's on the sidebar, I have to come up and click on it to bring up the details panel. We can also bring up new windows, new tabs, since by default Unreal Engine doesn't show all the windows by coming up to Windows and selecting something. So let's say if I want my levels, then I can click on it right there, and now I have my levels window that I could just drag and dock anywhere I like. So let's say if you customize your user interface to the point of no return, you have no idea what's happening, no worries, we can come up to Window, all the way down to Load Layout, and then load our default editor layout, just like that. And now we have back our default layout. Also, we can press F10. It will move all my tabs into the sidebar. So that's a good way of quickly increasing the size of your viewports. Speaking of viewports, let's go over our camera controls. That's how we can fly around within our world. So first off, you want to hold down the right mouse button. So with the right mouse button held down, now we are able to look around my world by just moving my mouse button and using the WASD keys to move around just like any first-person shooter. We can also use E to go up and Q to go down. So WASD, E, and Q to move around, all the while holding down the right mouse button. So this won't work if you're not holding down the right mouse button. And that's pretty much the gist of camera controls in UE4. We can also come up here and change the speed of my camera. So say if my camera is too slow, then we can just speed it up and bring it to 8. And now our camera is really fast. And this is a good tip if you're ever really lost and now you have no idea where your world is and you want to jump back to it. No problem. All you have to do is select any of your objects within the world outliner. Let's say this floor, and then press F. That will snap you back to your world. So if you get lost in your world, you can always snap yourself back to it. So we're going to come down. Also, you might have noticed that all these widgets right here are disappearing sometimes. That's with the G key. The G key stands for game view. So right now we're in editor view. This is the view that we're going to be looking at if we're editing our world. But let's say if we want to see our viewport the way our player would see, then I just press the G key and it would hide all those editor widgets and just allow us to look at the world as if we aren't editing it. Let's go over some viewport settings. So up here, we can change the perspective. So let's say if we want a top-down bird's eye view of my world, I can click on top, just like that. And now I can use the scroll wheel to zoom out and hold down the right mouse button to pan around. So now we can see our world is we're looking at it from a top-down perspective. And we can always come back up here and go back into perspective. Also, let's say if you want to isolate out just your base color, you come to lit and click on unlit just like that, just to see our color. You'll notice that for a lot of these settings, if I click right here under view modes, we see that we have a bunch of shortcuts. So if you hold down Alt, you can use Alt 2, 3, 4 to cycle in between those view modes. Another thing I like to do is, let's say, the show flags. Show flags will allow us to turn on and off the visibility of certain things in our editor. If I press G to bring back my game view mode, that's how we see our editor mode. And oftentimes I don't like this grid right here, so I'm going to come to show and select grid just like that, deselect it, and now we no longer see it in our editor mode, which is exactly what I want. So with the viewport and camera controls out of the way, let's go over how we can move objects. If you select an object and if you press the W key, that will bring up the translation widget. So with this widget, all we have to do is just move it around just like that. So hold down the left mouse button on an arrow and we can move it around. Or if I hover over in between the arrows on this box, we can lock it in that axis. And you'll also notice that when I'm moving this object around, it's right now snapping. It's snapping every 10 centimeters. We know it's snapping every 10 centimeters because we got up here, it says 10. If I click on the 10, I can set this to 100 centimeters, which is 1 meter. And now this object is snapping every 1 meter. Or if I want to turn off snapping, I can select this icon right here. That's how it's no longer blue. And now we get smooth movement. We are no longer snapping. Same thing with rotation. So if I press E, I can bring up my rotation widget. And now I can rotate around. It's snapping every 10 degrees. I'm going to turn it off right there. And finally, the R key is to scale. So with scaling, you can see right here that it is set to snapping. So every 1/4. I'm going to click it right there. That's how we're no longer snapping. Now we're getting smooth scaling. And of course, just like any other program, I can press Ctrl and Z to undo any edits. And within the scale, I can scale it on individual axes or on 2 axes by hovering over the line right here like this, or on everything by hovering over the white middle box just like that. So that'll scale everything uniformly. The controls are W, translation, E, rotation, and R to scale. How do we create new objects? Well, 2 ways. 1, we could just duplicate an object, and 2, we can drag in a new object. So to duplicate an object, all you have to do is hold down Alt, and with the Alt key held down, we're going to drag using the translation widget from it just like this. So again, hand off the keyboard, press Alt again, drag. So that's how we can duplicate objects. We can also delete objects by clicking on them and simply pressing the delete key just like this. So one thing I normally delete within the first person template is this word right here, because obviously we're in the first person template. I don't need a text telling me that I am. So I'm going to press the delete key. And then if we come up to create, we see we have a drop down of a bunch of different options. So I can drag in a new shape, let's say like a spear. Or if I go to create, I can drag in a light, so like a point light. So pretty much create is where we're going to be getting a lot of our objects. Or if I delete my light right there and delete this, if I press Control and space, we can also drag from the content browser. So let's say if I go into FP weapon and mesh, we see that I have a gun thumbnail right there. And if I drag from it, I can drag in a new gun into my level just like this. So that's one way, is to just drag from your content browser or content drawer. So I'm going to delete that right there. So let's say if you have an asset, but you have no idea where it's located within your content drawer. Because I know, because this exists within my project, that this exists somewhere within your content. Press Control and B, so Control and B at the same time, and that will jump to that location of where that asset is located within your content browser. So I can see it's located right there, and we can drag from here, and now we have 2 first-person characters. I'll delete 1. Keep in mind, when we're pressing play right now, we are basically possessing this object. So when I press play, we take control of what we just saw right there. So before we jump into blueprints, let's go over some of the content that is included within the first person template. So if we press Control and space, and if I click on content, we can see all the assets that make up my project right now, and they're divided into folders. So in geometry meshes, we have some of the 3D objects and materials that is currently making up this level we see right here. So keep in mind that 3D objects are also called static meshes within Unreal Engine. So I'll be using the two interchangeably. Then we can go to FP weapon. And of course, this is just the weapon that our character is holding. So this is the materials, the static meshes, and the textures. Although they're called skeletal meshes. And skeletal meshes are basically static meshes, but they have bones you can animate on them. And then we're going to go up to first person BP. And here are some of the blueprints that we're going to be exploring and building on top of to create a more complicated game than what we have here. And we also have the maps. If I double click on this map, let's go save selected. We can see that this is where this map right here is stored. So the map that we've been working on is stored right here in content, first person BP, and maps. And we can also see the name of a map by coming up here, and this is first person example map. And we don't need this overview, so I'll just delete that. Basically, if we double click on that, then it'll just give us an overview of the blueprints. But this is what this tutorial here is for. And then we have first person. First person is all the assets that make up the arms you see right here. So if we go into character mesh, we can see that we have our arm. And keep in mind, this isn't a static mesh necessarily. This is a skeletal mesh. And because it is a skeletal mesh, that means we can animate it. So if I come out into first person animations, and then if I double click on this, we can see that we have some animations that are currently being used by that skeletal mesh. So we will not be going over animation within this tutorial. That is a tutorial for another day. We are exclusively sticking to the basics of how to program a game. Before we move on to blueprints, we first have to grab some assets and move it from one project to another. So right now I have Target Game Asset Project. You can download this project, link in the description below for free, and make sure you unzip this project. So to transfer assets from one project to another, we first have to open up both projects. And don't forget, you can open up a project within a project folder by opening that project folder and double clicking on the executable. And once we have both projects open, I need to find the location of this content folder you see right here within the project I'm trying to move my assets into. So of course, if I open up my project folder, my content folder is right here. And then I can highlight this, Control C to copy where that content folder is. And then we're going to select the assets that I want to move. And I know all my assets are within the target folder right here. So then I'm going to right click on target and then scroll all the way down. And we're going to click on migrate. It will ask us if we want to migrate these assets. And I'm going to press OK. So now we need to navigate to the content folder of the project we are moving these assets into. So I'm going to go and Control and V in that location that we found it from. And now that we're in the content folder, and it's the content folder of this project folder right here, I am going to press on select folder. Just like that. So that should move the assets in, and we can see within first game that we have target and we have our static mesh within the project we are working in. Also, keep in mind that you can rotate around the static mesh within this editor here by holding down Alt and the left mouse button. And also with holding down Alt with the right mouse button, you can zoom in and out. So Alt right mouse button, zoom in and out. Alt left mouse button, you can rotate around. And holding down the L key and the left mouse button, we can view our static mesh with different angles of our sun. Now it is finally time to start talking about programming. And when I mention programming, probably the first thing that comes to your mind is someone sitting at a desk and typing out hundreds of lines of code. And while we can program games that way in Unreal Engine with the language C++, Unreal Engine also gives us the option of their own visual scripting language called blueprints. So instead of writing hundreds of lines of hard to read code, we can just get little boxes and string them together called nodes. And logically and functionally, they are the exact same thing as typing out code. It's another way to visualize your program. And in my opinion, it's a lot easier and it is a lot faster. So a common misconception is, should I learn C++ or should I learn blueprints? Well, ideally you would learn both, but even if you are going to be using C++, you're going to encounter blueprints, since blueprints is everywhere in Unreal Engine. One way or another, you're going to have to know blueprints, even if you're an environment artist. And that's exactly what we're going to do right now. We're going to go and jump straight into blueprints. So let's open up a blueprint, and specifically what is probably the most important blueprint in our level right now, and that is the character right here. So the first person character that we go around with and we can fire bullets from. So if I click on my character, if I press Control and B to jump to that character's location, the blueprints location, we can see that all the blueprints that make up my game currently are located within content, first person BP, and blueprints. So I could double click on first person character right here, but a shortcut, and I'll just exit out real quickly, is that you want to have a blueprint instance selected in your world, and then if you press Control and E, that will automatically open it up for you. So now that we have our blueprint open up, I'm going to go hold down the left mouse button and let's dock this window right here. That's how we can switch in between our level and our blueprint, just like that. And now the controls are scroll wheel if you want to zoom in, zoom out, and the right mouse button if you want to pan around. So scroll wheel and right mouse button. So right here, this might look very complicated if you're opening up blueprints for the first time, and that's completely understandable. Blueprints can be pretty intimidating for newcomers, since after all, we can make entire games using it. So right here, we see all the nodes that make up this logic right here. We can see that as this character, I can walk around, look around, fire spears, and then if I press the escape key on the top left hand corner, we can exit out of play mode. So keep in mind, we can play our game coming up here and pressing play right there, so we don't have to always be within our level editor if we want to play our game. So before we continue exploring blueprints, let's go over what all of these different windows up here mean. We can see that in the middle, we actually have a couple of tabs we can switch in between, and one of them is the viewport. So the viewport is a good visual representation to see all the different objects that make up our blueprint. And we can see at the top left hand corner, we have a components window, and you could think of the components window as basically like the world outliner. So it's a collection of all the different components that make up our blueprint. Right below that, we have the variables and functions. Don't worry, we're going to go over what these are in just a bit. And to the right here, we have the details. So of course, with details, it functions exactly like how it does within the level. If we click on an object, we get a bunch of properties that we can edit. And then we have the construction script. We won't be going over the construction script within this video, but I have a video. It should be in the right hand corner that does go over it. And then to the right here, we have the event graph. So the event graph is our main graph. This is where our main logic will be stored within our blueprint. And above everything, we have the toolbar. So the toolbar is essentially just like the toolbar within our level. It has a collection of commonly used tools, and it's very important that we can come into class defaults and class settings. So if you want to change, let's say, some default values on your blueprint, then you can come here and you can enable, disable, change different properties of your blueprint as a whole. And all the way to the left here, we have the compile button. The compile button is a pretty big deal because whenever we make a change within our blueprint, we want to make sure that we press compile in order to actually see our change. But it's also important to know that if we just press play, then everything will be compiled anyways. Now is finally time to go over how we create our own nodes, string different nodes together, and create our own game from scratch. So do not worry, I know this looks very complicated right here. I only have this blueprint open right now as an example. We will be creating our own blueprints in just a bit. So the way blueprints works, and this is very, very simplified, is that we have these red nodes right here. And these red nodes are events. These are the nodes that would fire, and all the nodes that are connected to this red node will be fired. So we can see that right here we have input, action, fire. So this is our left mouse button. And then we see this white wire right here. This is an executable wire. All the nodes that are connected to this executable wire will be executed in sequence. If we press the left mouse button, then pressed will fire an executable. It will come all the way right here. And then this montage play, which is the animation of our gun firing, will play. And then it will shoot from here, and then it will spawn our spear. And finally, then it would play a sound. So As soon as we left click, first it plays our animation, then it spawns a sphere, and then it plays a sound. So that's the very, very basics of blueprints. Essentially, we have events, and then we have our normal blueprints. In case you are confused of what just happened, we can visualize these blueprints and this executable wire in real time. So we can visualize what is happening within our blueprint while we are in game. And this is one of my favorite features of Unreal. And this is something that is not possible in coding. So let's do it right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and let me dock my window right here. And let me give myself some space. And let's zoom in on this location. And I'm going to come up here and press play. So we can see that I have my window. And, I can walk around. And then as soon as I fire my gun, hopefully you saw it. Also, it's very important. Right now, our mouse is locked to our game. If I press Shift and F1 at the same time, so Shift F1, we can get back that mouse. So we can move our screen up here. And I'm just going to make it even smaller. And then as soon as I fire my projectile, that white wire turns orange. So this is especially noticeable right here with jump, that as soon as I press jump, we can see those white wires turn orange. And that orange is indicating that that executable wire is firing. So when I press fire right here, we can see that executable wire telling our montage play to play that animation. And then if I move it right here, we'll notice right after when montage play is executed, then we're going to spawn an actor, specifically our sphere. And then finally, we are playing that sound. All the nodes you program in Unreal Engine, you can see the logic that's going on behind the scenes. And that's absolutely incredible. It's important to know that if you aren't seeing these orange wires, you want to come up here and then you want to select first person character. Since sometimes nothing will be selected, we want to specifically tell Unreal that we want to watch our character that we are inheriting right now. So we need to come up here and click on first person character. And now it is finally time to create our own nodes. So of course, what node do we need first? We need the event node. We need the red node right here. And we can grab an event by right-clicking on any empty space within my graph. So right-clicking will give us our node explorer. So we can search for any nodes within Unreal Engine. And I'm going to do keyboard and F. Just like that, I'm going to press enter. And we created our first event. So from here, we want to connect this to another node. And I could right-click here and type in the node. We are going to be using a print screen and select it like that, or I can left click and drag from the output, let go with the left mouse button, and that will automatically bring up our search bar. So then we can type in print stream right here and grab it like that, and it will automatically connect it. We can break a connection by holding down Alt and simply clicking like that. To connect up two nodes, you just want to left click, hold, drag into the input, and then let go of my left mouse button. And that will connect it just like this. So the in stream, we could call this anything. Let's call this my first node. And then press compile. Keep in mind, we haven't been pressing compile so far, but Unreal will automatically compile for us if we forget to press it. And then press play. So now we will see that whenever I press F, on the top left-hand corner, we get our screen. And also, it appears that our blueprint is firing correctly. So we can see that this node is being activated whenever I press this event. So that is pretty nice. And now it's time to create our own blueprint completely from scratch. So I'm going to highlight both of these and press the delete key. Also, it's important to know that we're not going to be touching this blueprint again. In the future, I will create a tutorial on how we can create a first-person character completely from scratch, but not on this one because then this tutorial will be a lot longer than expected. So I'm going to press compile and save, and let's jump back into our level. To create a blueprint is pretty simple. There are several different ways that we could create a blueprint, but the way I'm going to do it is the most simple way, and it's the way that gives us the most control because our blueprint will be empty by default. And that's exactly what I want because I want to show the full process. So if I press Control and space, I need to find a location within my content browser that I want to create a blueprint. I'm just going to keep it under blueprints folder right here. And then in any empty spot, I can right click and I can come up to blueprint class and simply select it like this. And now we want to pick a parent class. So I'm going to pick an actor because an actor is essentially anything that is in our world. If there's an object. If it's in a world, if you see it in the world outliner, then it is an actor. And that's exactly what I want, because we are going to be creating our target blueprints. And target blueprints are just targets that are floating in space in our world. So I'm going to click on actor, and then we're going to name it something. I'm going to call this BP underscore target. Keep in mind, you don't have to name this BP, but calling it BP and underscore is just the general naming convention that everyone uses when creating blueprints. So then I'm going to press enter, and now we just created our first blueprint. So I can double click on it, and we are going to open it up. So right now our blueprint looks very boring because there's nothing inside of it. So let's actually give our blueprint a static mesh. And of course, the static mesh I want to use is the target static mesh. So I'm going to press Control and space to bring up the content drawer, and let's navigate to our target. Remember, if you don't have the target, that's because you need to import this from the downloaded assets. And then I can simply just left click and hold and drag it into my components just like that, and I'll let go. So now we can see that my blueprint has the target right there. And if I hold down L and left mouse button, just like in the static mesh editor, I can move my sun around and view this from different sun angles. So I think this looks fine right now, but you'll also notice, especially if I zoom out. Actually, I'm going to press compile, and let's save this blueprint, and let's jump back into first person example map. I'm going to press Control and space, and let's bring in the blueprint that we just created, drag it in just like this. So now we have our first blueprint that is in our world. So when we press fire, when we fire into it, nothing happens. So let's set up an event that will fire whenever my projectile hits it. So I'm going to press escape, and then I can jump back into it by coming up here. Or if you remember, if I press Control and E, that will automatically open it up for us. But since our blueprint editor is already opened up, we don't need to. So now let's create an event that will fire whenever we hit this static mesh. So let's come to event graph, and we'll notice our event graph isn't empty. There are a couple of events already set up by Unreal that are very common. Now we don't need these events right now, and don't worry, we will go over what these events are in just a bit, but I'll highlight these and delete them just like that. So to create an event that will fire whenever anything hits this, we want to click on our static mesh, scroll all the way down, and then under events, we have on component hit. It's the first one. I want to click on this plus button right there, and that will create that event for us. So to double check that everything is working, let's drag from here. And now I'm going to type print string, and in big letters, let's say target hit, just like that. And I can click on this arrow, which will bring down some advanced options. So some nodes have this arrow that contain even more properties that we can edit. And let's make this text color not blue, but let's make it red. That's how we can much easier see what it is. And press OK. Now I'm going to compile, save, and I'm going to just bring this down again. Let's rotate this, and then we're going to press play. And now whenever I fire into it, we see on the top left-hand corner, we see target hit. So this appears to be working, but now there's a bug because I only want this event to fire when a projectile hits it. Now, if I walk up to it as a character and just jump into it myself, we can see it says target hit right there. So that's a bug. So to make sure that only the connected nodes right here will fire when a projectile hits it, we want to drag from other actor, and then we're going to type in cast to first person projectile, just like that. I'm going to press enter, and now we're going to get the cast, and then I'm going to hook it up like this. So casting can be pretty complicated, but all you need to know for this purpose right now is that on component hit, we're going to check that the object or actor that is currently hitting this static mesh is a projectile. So remember, projectiles are this ball right here that we're firing from our gun. And then if it is, then we're going to do target hit. If it's not, then we're not going to do anything. So we're just going to leave this output here blank. So now if I press play, let's see if that bug is gone. If I fire, we can see that target is hit. And then if I jump up to this, we see that the vent is firing, but the cast right there is blocking that executable wire from hitting my print string. That is exactly what I want, and I'll press escape right there. Now we need some way to track how many targets we do hit. So I want a way where if I press play, and then if I hit this target, we are keeping track of the amount of targets we have hit. So if I press escape, we can do that by using the game mode. So the game mode is what you expect. It's a blueprint, but it handles a lot of the game features. So if you're playing capture the flag, then a game mode will keep track of how many flags each team has. And if we press Control and space, we already have a game mode right there, but I want to create one from scratch. So I'm going to right click, let's go blueprint class, and we have game mode right there. So I'm going to go ahead and let's click on this, and I'm going to name this GM underscore target game, just like that. And let's double click and go into this game mode. Game modes are pretty special because we're able to specify what some of the main blueprints are of our game. And we can see right here that we have our pawn class. Our pawn class is essentially our character class. Our pawn is the actor that we are controlling. And right now set the default pawn. In the dropdown, let's set this to first person character, just like that. So I'm going to press compile and save. And within example map, I'm actually going to go ahead and let's delete this character right here. I'm press the delete key. And now I want to see the settings of my entire level because I want to tell Unreal that I want to use this game mode right here. And of course, since we just created this game mode, our level isn't using this game mode. To get the world settings, I need to come up to window and click on world settings just like that, which will show it right here. And then under game mode override, instead of first person game mode, let's do GM underscore target game, which is the one we just created. So now if I press play, everything seems like it's working. Our first person character is being used right now. And if I press escape, if we go into our game mode, and if I click on this arrow right here, which will reset it to its default value of default pawn, and then if I come back into first person example map and press play, we notice that we don't get that character. So that's why it is pretty important to specify within your game mode what our default character is, which is the first person character. Also, I noticed that we're missing our crosshair right now. So let's bring that back by coming to the HUD. And Unreal has already included a HUD within this template, which is the first person HUD. So now we have back our crosshair. Also, if you don't see these settings right here, you want to make sure that you have class settings selected. So class settings will bring up all the different defaults for our game mode. So now let's actually go into our event graph and let's start editing this game mode. So I'm going to go highlight all these and let's press delete. So now it is finally time to go over variables, specifically this window right here. So if you ever coded beforehand, then you already know what a variable is. But if you're brand new here, a variable is essentially a container of data. So we could create a variable by coming right here to variables and clicking on the plus icon. So now we have a new variable. Let's call this variable my var for variable. And then let's change this from a Boolean, which is true and false, to an integer, which is a whole number. And then I'm going to press compile. So down here, we can see my var. And then we can see right here that we can change this to a number. So we can make this 10, -1, 20. And then if I drag this into my world and let go, we can see that we can get my variable or we can set my variable. So if I get my variable and if I drag from here, I'm literally just going to be dragging whatever number is currently contained within this variable. And right now that number is 20. And we can see that. So I'm going to right click and let's add in an event, which is begin play. So the event right here, event begin play, will only fire at the very beginning of our game. So when we press play, this event will fire. And then let's print string. So I'll drag from here, we're going to go print string. And then I'll drag this variable into my string just like this. And then it will convert that integer into a string, and then it will print whatever that integer is. So then if I press play, we can see on the top left-hand corner, we get 20, and then it disappeared. So I'm going to come down and drop down, and let's make this duration 10, and let's change this into an orange. So now instead of 20, let's make this 0. We press play, we can see that we get 0. So I'm going to exit out of this. And instead of getting a variable, we can also set a variable. So we can change whatever number that is contained within this variable by dragging from my var, letting go, and let's go to set variable. So I'm going to hook it up just like this. And now we can set our variable something else that isn't the default variable right now, which is 0. So instead of it being 0 and not changing it with the default value, I'm going to come here and let's set it to 25. So now if I press play, we can see that my variable now is 25. So we can override that initial default variable by setting it right there. So that is the gist of what variables are. And now it's time to create a counter for our target. That's how we can see how many times we hit a target. If I come back here Now I'm going to go delete my variable right here. Let's go delete all my nodes actually. And then right here, let's delete this variable. And let's create a new variable. We honestly could have just renamed that variable because we're going to be storing an integer, but that's fine. And I'm going to call this current score, just like that. So now I want to set up some logic. That's how whenever where is our target? Okay, there it is. That's how whenever I fire into it, then this current score will increase. So I want to be a default value 0. And then I'm going to drag from here. Let's go get current score. And I'm going to drag from this, and I'm going to press plus plus. So plus plus will just add 1, and then it will set this variable. And now let's add in a custom event. So I'm going to right click and type in custom event. So now we're creating our own event with its own name. So let's call this add score, like this, and then I'm going to hook it up just like that. So whenever Actually, I am very annoyed by that player start location right now. So I'm going to come into, let's say, our level, and right there is our player start. Now I could move it, or I can delete it because I want to show everyone where player start is. If I come up to top left-hand corner, we have create, and down here we have player start. I can just drag it in, and now we have a new player start. So if I press play, we can see that I'm just by default facing the target, which is exactly what I want right now, because I was getting kind of annoying that I had to find that target. So let's go back into GM_target game. And now if I press play, I want it. That's how whenever I fire my gun into that target, we're going to increase this current score by 1. So I need a way to call this event from our target right there. So let's jump back into our target blueprint. And then from here, let's get our game mode. So we can right click and just type in get game mode. And that will get our current game mode. Now we just have one issue, and that is if I drag from this pin right here, and keep in mind the blue represents that this is an object, this is a class. If I drag from here, then if I type in add score, we don't get anything. That's because this is just a generic game mode. We need to tell Unreal Engine that I specifically want to get GM_target game. And we can do that by dragging from it and going cast to. So we're going to do cast to GM_target game, which will tell Unreal that I want to treat this game mode as if it is target game. So make sure that it is a target game. And then if it is, I'm going to hook it up right here. And let's delete this print string. Then I'm going to drag from it and let's go add score, just like that. So now if I double click on add score, we're going to jump to that custom event we just created. So now whenever a projectile hits our target, then we're going to go and get our game mode, make sure that our game mode is the correct game mode, which is GM_target game. And then if it is, we're going to tell that game mode to add a score, and that will simply increment our current score count by 1. And let's actually give ourselves a way to see our score count as a debug. So of course, I'm going to drag from here and let's go print string. Keep in mind at first, we're going to be using a lot of print strings. Print string is great for debugging, but we're going to add in user interfaces in just a bit. I'm going to hook it up right there, and let's change this color from blue to something more noticeable like red. So now if I press play, then we can see that whenever I fire into this target, we are slowly incrementing our count within our game mode. It starts off at 0, then it's going to increase to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So it is working exactly as we want it to. But we'll notice that within our game mode, we're not seeing any orange lines. We're not seeing our executable fire anything. And that's because right here, I need to make sure that I select it as our current game mode right there, just like that. So now if I press play, we can see everything's firing correctly. So I'm going to press escape to exit out of my game. Okay, so just as a recap of what we're trying to do, if I go to first person example map, right now we just have one target. I want to have multiple targets. So I'm going to hold down Alt, and I can drag another target. Let's rotate it. And then I'm going to go ahead and let's scale my target. That's how this target is a little bit bigger. Make this a little bit farther. Maybe that target's a little bit too big right now, so just decrease the size. Hold down, let's grab this one. Let's hold down Alt to make a duplicate of that one, and let's rotate just like this. So when I press play, I want to hit 1, 2, 3, and then we win the game. But right now there's an issue, and that is I can get to 3 by just shooting this 3 times. So that will give us a score of 3. And that is a glitch. That is no good. we will get dirty cheaters within our game, and we need to fix that. So let's jump back into our BP_target. So we want a way for our target blueprint right here to check whether or not it was already hit. And if our target blueprint was already hit, then we're not going to add another score to our game mode. And we could do that with a Boolean variable. So in targets, let's create a new variable. And this is going to automatically be a Boolean by default. Remember, we can change variables by clicking on it right there and selecting Boolean. So let's name this one right here, and I'm going to name it with F2, or I can come up here and rename it. Let's call this isHit ? So now I'm going to press compile, and the default value should be false, since, of course, by default, our targets haven't been hit yet. So we're going to go ahead and let's drag all of this out here just like this. So I'm going to drag from isHit, and let's get it right there. And now I'm going to drag from my Boolean. And of course, if you've ever done any programming ever, I think you know what we're going to do. We're going to get an if node, but within Unreal, they're called branch. So I'm going to type in branch and bring it in just like that. So essentially, if isHit is false, then everything that will be connected to false will run. And then if isHit is true, then everything connected to true will run. And we only want this logic to run if isHit is false. So I'm going to go hook it up just like this, and then hook up false like that. But we have one issue, and that is we need a way to tell Unreal whether or not it was hit. So I'm going to drag from isHit. Let's go set. So then if our target has not already been hit yet, then we're going to set isHit to true, so that we know that we have already added the score associated with this target. So now if I press play, and if I hit this target, we can see we went to 1. And let me go move it down here. That's what we can see. And now if I hit it again, nothing is happening. That branch is blocking it. So again, right here, if I hit it, actually, I'm going to press Shift F1. And we're going to come up here. And now let's select the third target. So BP_target 3. So now we are looking at this specific target, because right there we were looking at only this first target. We weren't looking at the second target. So now that we're looking at the third target, if I shoot my projectile, then we can see that ran, but now it is no longer running. So we fixed that glitch. We stopped the cheaters. Also, there are some shortcuts, because as you can expect, the branch node right here is one of the nodes we're going to be using the most of. So if you hold down B and left click, you can add a branch quickly, just like that. So I'll select all of them, and let's press the delete key. And also, if I hold down Control and drag a variable, then that will get it. And then if I hold down Alt and drag a variable, then that will set it. So we don't have to drag from here and select Get or Set. We can hold down Control or Alt to get our variables that way. And normally, and this is just me right now, but normally we don't really hook up anything to false if there's nothing hooked up to true. So instead of the condition being isHit, let's make the condition is not hit. So I can drag from here, select the not Boolean, and plug it up like this. And since we're switching it right now, we need to hold down Control, and then I can drag from that, the executable, and simply just drag it into true just like that. So to recap what this entire line of nodes is doing, this event will be called whenever anything is hitting our target. And then we want to make sure that that thing is a projectile. And then we're going to double check and make sure our target hasn't already been hit. So if our target has not been hit, then we want to mark this target as already being hit. And then we're going to get our game mode and make sure that our game mode is GM_target game, which contains our score. And then we're going to add our score, which is located within our game mode. Let's jump back into our level and see what we have so far. So let's press play. And now you can see that if I hit a target, we add 1 to the score in the top left-hand corner. We can see that score, 2, and 3. So our game is slowly forming, but there is one glaring issue, and that is it looks kind of ugly having to rely on the print string node to keep track of our score. So this is where user interfaces will come in handy. So in Unreal, you can create a user interface using Unreal's motion graphic UI designer, which is a mouthful, so people call it UMG for short. So with UMG, you could create user interfaces, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to create a nice user interface to keep track of the player's current score, how many targets the player has already destroyed. And we can create a user interface using a widget blueprint. So let's stop this game. And then I'm going to press Control and Space, and let's create a user interface. So to create a user interface, you want to, of course, right click in any empty spot within my content drawer. And let's go to user interface. And then I'm going to select a widget blueprint. So I'm going to call this one WBP underscore UI. Just like that. So I'm going to press save. And let's double click on this. So this is the widget blueprint editor. This is essentially where we're going to be making our user interfaces. So the controls are the same right now. You use the scroll wheel to zoom in and out, and the right mouse button to pan around. In the bottom here, we have a timeline. That's how we can animate our user interface. We're not going to be animating anything right now. So I think I can just exit out of all these windows. So you can hover over a tab and use the middle mouse button to get rid of that tab just like that. So now that's how we have more real estate to work in. Also, if you ever want to reset your windows, just like within your first person example map, you come up here to Windows, load layout, and load the default editor layout. In the top left hand corner, we have the palettes. So we can drag from here some more widgets. So let's say I can add in my text. And of course, to right here, we have the details, all the different properties of my text that I can edit. So let's say I can go into font right here within the drop down, and I can change the size from 24 to 32 just to make it bigger. And let's nest this in the top left hand corner, and let's call this my first widgets, just like that. And to the bottom here, we have the hierarchy. The hierarchy is essentially how you will nest different widgets within each other. We won't be going into that much depth for this tutorial because we're making a pretty simple UI right now. And all the way up here, we have the graph. So yes, this is also a blueprint. We have access to a lot of the same nodes you would see within your actor nodes and your game mode nodes. So right here, we can always go back to our designer by coming up to the left hand corner and clicking on designer just like that. So let's go ahead and let's add this user interface to my game. And to do so, we need to come into GM_target game. And I want to add this user interface as soon as my game starts. So we're going to be calling it from the event begin play. Also keep in mind, if you don't have event begin play, you want to right click and just type in event begin play just like that. So I'm going to drag from here, and we need to create a widget just like this. And of course, we need to select the new widget I just made, which is WBP_UI. And now if I press play, nothing is happening because I need to tell Unreal that I want to show this specific widget onto my viewport. So we could drag from our return value and add to viewports just like this. And now if I press play, we can see that my user interface is in the top left-hand corner right there. So probably the thing that's really popping out at you right now is this flower thing right here. And this is the anchor. And I could explain what the anchor does, or I could just show what it does. So I'm going to go keep this anchor up at the top left-hand corner. You can move your anchor around, of course, anywhere, but you could come up to anchor and we could just select top left-hand corner just like that. So I'm going to call this one right here. Let's call this top left. And then I'm going to press Control and W to duplicate this widget. Actually, I want to make sure that I have this selected, and then press Control and W to duplicate it. And then we're going to drag this new one all the way over here. And let's change the anchor to the right hand side. And then I'm going to call this one top right. And then we're going to go and duplicate this once again. And let's drag this one into the middle here. And within the anchor, let's select the middle box just like this. And let's call this one center. So now if I press play, we can see that we have our user interfaces. We have one at the top left, top right, and the center. And then as I move and scale different window sizes, we can see that my top left is taken to top left, top right to top right, and the center to the center. So this is essentially how you would handle responsive design. This is how you would handle different screen sizes for your game. So that is simply what an anchor does. It anchors that widget to that specific spot on your viewport. That's how you never get, let's say, like a glitch where your user interface is off of the screen and your player can't see it. So with that being said, let us delete all of these. And within the top left-hand corner, this will be our score. So let's actually increase the size from 32. Let's try maybe something a bit bigger. Let's go 48. I'm going to leave it at that for now. So let's go score. And then so with a space just like that. And this will be where the score is. Right now, my text is looking kind of bland. So let's add in a small drop shadow. We can add in a drop shadow by coming down to shadow colors. And within the drop down, let's change this from 0 to 1, which is our opacity of our shadow. And then for the shadow offset, I can increase this just a bit to make my drop shadow a little bit more noticeable. So if we press play right now, there we go. We see my score up there, and that is still too small. So I'm going to keep this at 64. If I press play, okay, that looks better. Okay, so first off, we need a way to get our current score. That's from our game mode. And of course, we're going to do this from the blueprint section of our widget. So let's come to graph and let's get a reference to our game mode. So let's delete everything right there for now. And we don't have an event begin play for our widgets, but what we do have is event construct, which is essentially event begin play. This will fire whenever our widget is created, which is right here on event begin play. So this is essentially like an event begin play. And then we're going to go ahead and let's get our game mode. And then we're going to drag from here and we're going to cast it to GM_target game. Now let us store our game mode, a reference to our game mode within a variable. That's how I can get this game mode anywhere within my graph. And we could create a variable. We could come over here to variables and press the plus icon. Or we could do a shortcut where we right click right here and go to promote to variable. So it'll automatically set it up for us. And I'm going to call this variable GM_ref. So the way you would make a reference to a game mode variable is that let's create a variable right here. And within the drop down, we would just type in game mode. And then we would get the reference to our, actually, it would be the name of our game mode. So that'd be GM_target game. And then we would get a reference to our game mode that way. So I'm going to select this variable we made and let's just delete that because that was an example. So now that we have our game mode, let's create an event. So we're going to create another custom event. I'm going to right click and type in custom event. And this will be update score. So this event will be called whenever we want to update the score of our user interface. And then I'm going to drag from here and we want to set the text of this widget right here. But there's just one problem, and that is we can't get this widget. And that's because I need to select this text and make sure all the way up here that is variable is checked on. And let's actually call this one score text. So now if I come to graph, we see that we have a reference. Actually, we need to compile first and then save. And within variables, we have a reference to score text. And I could grab that reference and I can get the score text. So I'm going to drag from here and then we're going to go set text. And you want set text to select it. And this is where we can manually set that text. So instead of score, it will be whatever is set right here. So what do we want within score? Of course, we want our score. So let's get our reference to our game mode. I'm gonna hold down control. That's what we do the get and drag from here. And let's get our score just like that. So we're gonna grab our score that's located in our game mode and drag this into my text. That's how we actually see it. And we're going to go drag and update score just like this. So we need somewhere where we can call update score. Well, of course, when is our score updated? Our score is updated within the game mode. So right here is where we're going to call update score. And we already have a reference to our widget blueprint. Although we need to turn this reference into a variable. So I'm going to right click right here. And actually, I'm going to hold down Alt. That's how we can break this variable. And now we can right click and then select promote to variable. And let's call this UI5. So this is a reference to our user interface. Let's hook it up just like this and take the output of this user interface and put it into add to viewport. So now that we have a variable that contains our user interface, I can drag from this user interface and let's delete this print stream because of course this is what our user interface is replacing. And I can drag from here and let's go update score. So now this should work if I hook it up right there. So whenever we're adding a score, we're going to tell our user interface to update our score by grabbing that score from our game mode and setting the text right there. You see that score is still score, but as soon as I fire and hit a target, you see it's 1, 2, and 3. So now we want to add the score text before the actual score counts. So we can do this, and this might be a little bit complicated. If I delete this right there, let's move everything back here. And I'm going to drag from this, and we're going to go to text and string, just like that. So we're going to convert a string into a text because strings have a nice little node that I want to use if I drag from here, and that is the append, just like this. So I'm going to drag both of these down here, and let's go score. And this is very important. I want to add in the space. So score and spacebar. And then for the B, that will just be current score right there. And of course, whenever you see a node like this, this is converting our integer into a string. So I'm just going to move everything just like this. And now if I press play, okay, we can still see that score is like that. But as soon as I press like that, score 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so let's actually call update score one more time. If I go GM_target game, come up here, let's drag from this one, and let's go update score. That's how we are updating the score so that we're actually displaying a 0 right there. So I'm going to hook it up just like this. So now if I press play, you can see that our score is 0, 1, 2, and 3. And that is exactly what we want. And everything seems to be working fine so far. So here is a tip. Right now we can see that we have a line that's going through a node, and this looks pretty ugly. So one thing I do like to do is you can double click on any wires just like that, and that will add in a reroute node. So we could reroute it just like this, and then I could double click again. That's how our wire is going beneath that node and then ending up in update score. So you can do some wild stuff. You can double click and reroute nodes all over the place if you really want to. So nodes are pretty customizable. So I press Control Z to undo those. And while we're on the topic of customizing nodes, another thing you could do is highlight a group of nodes and press the C key to add in a comment. So we can call this one something like add score. And then we can highlight this and press the C key and then go begin play. So that's a nice way of organizing your nodes. I'm pressing Control and Z because we don't need those comments for now. So don't forget to come into content drawer and save all, because that'd be very disappointing if we lost all that progress. So if we play our game right now and see what's happening, we can see we have a score of 0, then 1, 2, and 3, but then nothing happens. We want a win condition whenever we hit all the targets that are located within our world. So that's what we're going to handle right now. So I'm going to press the escape key. And let's go into our game mode, and we are in our game mode right now. And let's get the number of targets that are within our world. So within GM_target game, let's go and actually let's move this all over here. And I'm gonna hold down Alt, so that's how I can break the connection just temporarily. And let's get all the targets that are within my world. So I'm gonna right click and let's go get all actors of class, and we're going to select that. So specifically the class I want is the class we created, the blueprint. So BP_target. So I will hook it up like this, and now you'll notice that we get this weird node that we haven't seen before. That is a bunch of squares. So this is actually an array. An array is a collection, a list of different variables, but we're not trying to get the individual targets right now. I'm just trying to see how many targets there are existing within my world. So I'm going to drag from this, and I'm just going to get the length of this array, which will give me how many targets exist within the world. And let's create a new variable. So I could create a new integer variable, or I can click on current score and press Control and W to duplicate that. So let's call this one max score. And now I'm going to hold down Alt, drag from this, let go, and hook it up just like that. So we're going to set my max score. And let's put it in just like this. And let's actually see our max score. So let's jump back into WBP_UI. And let's add in some more things I want to append by clicking on this plus icon right here to add in another pin. So this one will be space out of space. Let's click another pen. And then for this one, drag from GM_ref, and we're going to get our max score. and drag it just like this into D. Okay, so now if we press play, we can see that I have 0 out of 3 targets. If I shoot 1 out of 3, 2 out of 3, 3 out of 3, and it is at this point that I want the game to be over because we won the game. There are no more targets from which we can increase our score. So we're going to create a little condition, a win condition for us within the game mode. So within game mode, let's jump to game mode. And then after update score, I want to see if my current score is equal to our max score. So of course, what we're going to use, we're going to hold down B, left click, and let's add in a branch. So I'm going to drag current score, hold down control, that's how I can get it. Let's get our max score, and I'll drag out from current score, and I'll press equal, equal. So this will just check whether or not these two are equal with each other. And then if they are equal with each other, hook it up here just like this. Then this means from our true, we won the game. Now we need to create a new user interface that will tell us that we won the game because our player wouldn't know by now. And we can double check that this is working by dragging from here. Let's go print screen and let's go tell ourselves that we won. And let's make the duration 100. That's how this doesn't go away until a while. And of course, change the text color from something to noticeable like red. And now if we press play, 1, 2, 3, we can see right there, we won. Hopefully it is noticeable, but it appears that these nodes are working. Okay, let's create the win screen. So we're going to go through the same process we did beforehand to create this widget up here. We're going to press Control and space, and within our blueprints, let's right click. Let's go user interface at the very bottom, and let's select widget blueprint right there. So we're going to name this one WBP underscore end screen, just like this, and press enter. So now we can double click on it, and we have our end screen. So let's first tell the player that you just won the game. So I'm going to drag in a text right in the middle, and let's anchor this. That's how it's always going to be in the middle of our game. And I'm going to increase the size of my text. And then I'm going to go ahead and let's center my text. So I'll come down here, and for justification, I'll select the middle one. That's how my text is always in the center of my box. And then let's increase this size to 64. And for the text, I'm going to say you win, exclamation point. And of course, let's add a little drop shadow. So within alpha, let's change this to 1. And then let's increase that shadow offset just a bit. So I'm going to compile, let's save. And I'm going to come back into my game mode. And within here, we can delete this temporary debugger. And then I'm going to drag from this, and let's go create widget. And of course, we're going to do the end screen, the widget that we just created. And then we need to add to viewport because it will create the widget, but it won't add that widget to the viewport. So now if I press play, let's go see what happens. 1, 2, 3. And it says you win. So that's nice. So it appears that it is working right now, but we have one issue. That is I can still run around, shoot targets in my game. I want to disable the input for our game and bring up the mouse, and also add a button where we can restart and replay the game if we really want to. So first off, let's disable the input for our character once we do beat the game. And that is, I can drag from here, and let's type in set input mode UI only, just like that. And then for the widget, of course, we're going to use this widget right here. So I'll drag from this, and let's organize it. So let's double click on a wire. And let's double click on a wire right here. And then we need a player controller. I'll drag from here and go get player controller. You could think of the player controller as basically a reference to the player itself. So now if we press play, we can see that we won, and we can no longer move our mouse. We can no longer look around and move around. So that's exactly what I want, but I also want to show my mouse. So I'll drag from the player controller, and let's type in show mouse cursor, and let's set it. And of course, this is a Boolean, so it's true or false. Let's set this to true and hook it up just like that. So now we will see our mouse. I'll double click on it and move it down just like this. So now let's work on our buttons. I'm going to compile, save. Now let's go back into our widget, and from button, I'll drag out a button just like this, and let's plop it right in the middle right there. And then let's anchor it also into the center. So let's go increase the button size. And in order to give my button a word within it, some text, we need to drag a text, and then we need to nest it into the button just like this. So you want to drag a text over onto your button. It will snap to your button and let go. So now that we have the text in there, let's call this text restart, question mark. And now we have a nice button. If I press play, we can see that I get my mouse automatically, and we have this button right here that I can click on, but of course nothing happens. So I need to create some logic that will restart our game when we click on this button. To create an event for our button, all we have to do is click on our button, scroll all the way down here, and we see that we have event on clicked. So I'm gonna press that right there. Actually, let's rename our button. So let's go back to designer, button, and I'm gonna call this one restart button. Just like this, and let's compile. So going into graph, what do we want to do? We want to restart, and we want to reopen whatever level we are currently on. And right now we are on the first person example map, so I can drag from here and then type in open level by object reference. And now within the drop down, I can select a level, and that is just my first person example map. So this should work. If I press play, restart, we see that we restart back in our level, but we can't move around or look around because if you remember, if we go back into our game mode, we disabled that right here. So let's come all the way up to event begin play, and we can enable it. That's how whenever we restart the level, we can actually move our character around. So let's go get player controller, and then drag from here and go set input mode game only. Hook it up just like this, and now this should work. But before we test it, let's make our win screen just a little bit nicer. So let's go back into our end screen, and we're going to go into designer, and I specifically want, I believe it's called blur. Okay, background blur. So I'll just drag it onto my background, and actually I'm going to drag this. That's how it's the first one being rendered. So drag it all the way up here, just like that. And then I'm going to put it up here, and I'm just going to make it as big as possible. And for anchor, I want this to fill my entire screen. So I'm going to choose this one right here. So I'll just fill the entire screen. So this should work. And if I click on background blur, let's increase that blur strength from 0 to 2. So if I can compile, save, let's play. So 1, 2, 3, and restart. 1, 2, 3, restart. Okay, so everything is working great right now. So let's do a recap of all the logic that's currently within our game mode. So first off, we see that we enable input for our character. That's so we can actually control our character right here. And then if I highlight all this, actually, if you hover over a node, you see that we get this little text bubble. If I click on this, we can give ourselves a comment. So what's happening right here is that I am getting amount of targets in world. So right now there's just 3. So this has been giving out 3, but let's create a new target. We go into first person example map. Let's drag from here, holding down Alt. I can rotate this. Also, it's important to know that if you want to rotate this along the target, then we could come up here, and then instead of a globe icon, we can make this a square. So I can rotate this just like that. So let's maybe make this a little bit thinner and larger. Just like this. So now if I press play, instead of 3, this should be 4. And exactly, so we can see it's 0 out of 4 now. So we get the amount of targets in the world. We set that into our max score. And then we create our user interface right here, and we save that user interface into a variable. And of course, we update our score. That's how we're just not stuck with there not being any text within our user interface. And this all happens as soon as our game is created. And then whenever our ball hits the score, we are calling add score from that target. We're going to add 1 to that score. We're going to update our user interface. That's how it reflects it. And then we're going to check for the win condition. So I'm going to go hover over this, and let's call this win condition. Let's call this win check. We're going to check if we win, and then if we did win, when current score is equal to max score, then we're going to create our end screen blueprint, add it to viewport, and set game mode to UI only. That's how we can actually use our mouse cursor and show our mouse cursor so that we can press this button right here on whether or not we want to restart our level. Okay, so our game is pretty good. If we press play, we see that we have a bunch of targets, and if we hit all the targets, we win the game. But right now, this game is really easy. It's not that hard. So let's make this a little bit harder and a little bit more fun by adding in a countdown timer. So we're going to be racing against the countdown timer, and we need to make sure that we hit all the targets before that countdown timer makes it to 0. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing right now. And we're going to make this timer right here within the game mode. Luckily for us, Unreal Engine has a really helpful node, and that is the timer node. So I'm going to go and let me select all of this and just drag it a little bit forward. And then I'm going to drag from here and let's go set timer by event. I'll just press OK. And then I can drag from this and then go to add custom event. And let's call this decrement timer. Let's go decrement count. So every time this timer runs, it's going to call this event. And then this event will decrease our count, our timer, by 1. So we need to make sure that looping is checked on, and let's right now give this every half second. So I just want to show what is happening. So every half second, this event will run, and then we're going to drag from here and we're going to go print string. And then we're going to say event called. And I'm going to make this red just like this. So that's how we can actually see what is happening. And keep in mind that this is connected to event begin play. So this timer should start to run immediately once the game starts and plays. So if I press play, and then if I press shift and 1, we can see that it's getting called right there. I'm going to move my window up here. And then let's go set this. That's how we can actually see what's happening with our game mode. And we can watch what's happening. So every half second this is running, and we can see event is being called. Actually, that's how we could more visibly see what's happening. Let's make this 1, because maybe a half second was a little bit too close to each other. And now we can see every 1 second this fire. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And this is what we're going to use to slowly count down our time. That's how we can try to beat it within our game. Actually, let's call this decrement time. So I'm going to rename it right here. Let's call this decrement time. And then let's create a new variable. I'm going to click on the plus icon. And of course, we're going to make this variable an integer. And let's rename this start time, just like that. And for now, let's keep it at, let's try 100. And then for the time, actually, let's make this 300. And then I want this to loop. Let's make this loop every 1/100th of a second. So 0.01. So this should loop every 1/100th of a second. And now let's start to decrement it. So I'm going to get my start time. Let's bring it out. And then I'm going to drag from it and go minus minus. This would just subtract 1 every time this event runs, which is every 1/100th of a second. So drag it like this. And then let's print it out. And now if I press play, we can see that it's slowly started to count down. It goes from 250 all the way to 0. And then it's going to go into the negative range, because we need to add a stop to it, but we'll add that later. Because first, let's go create a UI. That's so we can actually see our time and not have to rely on the print string right here. So let's go back into our WBP UI right here. And then let's create a new one. So I'm just going to duplicate this. I'm going to grab it and press Control and W to duplicate this. And I'm going to drag the new one all the way over here. And let's call this one time text or timer text. And make sure is variable is checked on. And then instead of score, let's call this one time. And of course, we need to set the anchor, because I want this to always be at the top right hand corner. So anchors, I'll click right there just like that. Okay, so now if I press play, we can see that I have my score right there and I have my time. So let's go and start changing the time. And it looks like it is locked to the top right hand corner. That's exactly what I want. So I'm going to come into graph. And I think instead of out of right there, I think that's a little bit too big. So I'm just going to add in a slash. So that's how we can see that it is 0 out of 4, but we're using a slash now just to save on some user interface space. So let's create a new custom event. I'm going to right click and let's type in custom event. And I'm going to name this set countdown text. Now that we have our countdown right there, we can see that we can grab our timer text. Don't forget, make sure that our timer text variable is checked on. That's so we can actually grab it from here. We're going to get it. And just like right here, I'm going to drag from it and go set text, just like that. And then we're going to do the same thing we did right there. And that is we're going to drag from here. We're going to go to text string. That's how we're going to get an input of a string so that we can get this node or this function. If I drag from here, and let's call this append. So keep in mind terminology. If you see a node and then it's green like this means it's a function. So this is a function and these are functions. So for A, of course, I want to type in time and colon, and let's go space. And then I want to get the time. So I'm going to grab GMRef. Let's control and W to duplicate a node and drag from here. And let's go get start time and drag it into it just like this. So actually, I think I'm just going to rename this time because that could be a little bit confusing since we are decrementing this time. It's not just our start time. So let's come back in GM_target game and let's call this one right here just time like that. Let's compile, save, go back into right here, and it automatically renamed it also right here for us. So let me drag everything and let's hook up the event just like this. And actually, let's call this update countdown text. And within here, let's drag from, let's delete this. And then we're going to drag from UI_ref. So let's get UI_ref. And then let's go update countdown text right there and hook it up like this. So now if I press play, we can see that our countdown is slowly going down and then it's going to go into the negative ranges. So let's change that value right there. We're going to first update our count and then we're going to check whether or not our time is equal to 0. So then if it is equal to 0, then we're going to drag from here and let's grab a condition, actually an if statement. So a branch. And then if it's equal to 0, and actually let's not do if it's equal to 0, let's do if it is less than or equal to 0. Because just in case if there's a glitch or maybe a couple of frames drop and then our time is within a negative range, it will still stop. So we will still give ourselves a loss condition. So I'm going to hover over my node and click on the comment and we'll type in loss check. So this will tell us whether or not our player lost the game. And then if we did lose this game, then I'm just going to print string real quickly right here. And let's call this lost game. And of course, we're going to make it red. That's how it's more noticeable. And change the duration to 100. And we just have one issue, and that is if I press play, we're going down. And then when we hit 0, that counter is still happening. So let's add a check right here that will stop the counter. So I'm going to move all my nodes. And then I'm going to create a new variable. So let's create a new variable and let's call this variable is game over ? And we're going to make this a Boolean. So I'm going to hold down is game over, hold down Alt. Let's set it right here. And then of course, if our loss check. So if this is true, that means we lost the game. So that means our game is over. So check that right there. And then we want to make sure that our game is not over. And then we run all the logic that's right here. So I'm going to drag out is game over. And we're going to do a not. And of course, we're going to do another conditional check. An if statement. So a branch like this. So now this should stop at 0. Also, let's compile, save, and make sure is game over. The default value is set to false because our game shouldn't be over as soon as we start our game. That'd be weird. So we press play. Now we can see we're going down, 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 and then we stop right at 0. So this is great. Now let's work on the end screen right now. That's how we can actually display to our player that we lost the game. Also, here's a shortcut. You notice that whenever I compile, I press save. If you want to save on an extra click, you could click on these 3 dots right here. And then in the drop down, we could go to save on compile and then go to always. That's how whenever we compile, our blueprint will always save. So that's a great tip. And speaking of saving, let's go control space and let's save everything. So let's go into our end screen. And it seems like our end screen is right here. And then I'm going to make this text a variable because we want to change this text from you win to you loss. So let's make this right here. Let's call this end message. And I'm going to make this a variable so we have access to edit this. And then within the graph, I'm going to drag from end message. Let's go get it. Drag from here. And we're going to go, of course, set text once again. select it right there. And then I'm going to make this you lost exclamation point, just like this. Let me go delete this one right here and this one right here. And then I'm going to go hide this comment by clicking on the comment right there, just like that. So that will hide it. And then I can set it up just like this. So there's one issue, and that is if I press play, even when we won, we still get the lost screen. So that is no good. So let's add a condition to our entire widget, our entire blueprint as a whole. And we can do that by coming to variables. Let's create a new variable. And by default is a Boolean. That's exactly what we want. And then I'm going to call this lost game ? So if lost game is true, so drag from here, we're going to go branch. Then we change that text from you won to you lost. So only when it's true. So when we create this blueprint, it's going to check whether or not we did lose the game. So how are we going to check if we did lost the game? How are we going to change this variable? Well, we could come to here, and then I'm going to click on expose on spawn, save, and I believe we will get a message. It says make sure instance editable is also checked on. So I'll check right there. Let's go and compile. And now if we come back into gm_target, and if we scroll down here to our create WBP end screen widget, keep in mind within this widget right here, we create a new Boolean, and I made sure to check on expose on spawn and instance editable. We notice that there is no difference to this node, and that's because we need to refresh this node. So I'm going to go in the dropdown, select none, and then select that same widget again, which was the end screen. And now we can see we get a new variable right here, and we could check whether or not we lost the game or not. So of course, right here, when we create the end screen widget, this is connected to the win condition. So we want to make sure that this is unchecked because we won the game. Now I'm going to highlight all of these nodes and press Control and C. So let's copy and paste these nodes at the very end here. So that's why we don't have to use this print string. I just delete that, Control and V to bring those nodes in. And we're going to hook it up just like this. And as we can see, this is connected to the lost condition. So I'm going to make sure lost game is set to true. So now if we compile, let us play our game. We're going down, 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 and we hit 0 and we lost. So now we can press restart and we can try the game again. So this is really fun, but I believe that there is a glitch. If I press restart, let me go hit both of these. Okay, we won the game, but then we lost the game. So we won it and then we lost it, and that's because we need to add in a conditional check. Since what is happening right now is that we win the game, so then it will create this widget and add this widget to the viewport, which is the win screen. But then we are still counting down. So then over here, it will still create the lost screen once we hit 0. So 2 of these widgets are being created, and that doesn't make any sense. So what we could do is that I'm going to highlight this. Let's Control C, and let's make sure that our game is over when we do win right here. So when we win, our game is set to over. That's how right here our timer will stop. Since remember, we added this check right here where if our game is not over, then we continue on. But if it is over, it'll be false, and all of this will not run. We will no longer create that second widget right here. So if I press play, we win, and our timer stops at 39 right there. Now you probably notice that we are repeating nodes right now. Pretty much this set of nodes and this set of nodes right here are identical except for the lost game. So we have that unchecked, and then we have that checked right there. And oftentimes we don't want to repeat nodes because number one, that's wasteful, and number two, we don't have to. We can combine all these nodes into one node using functions. So let's go over functions right now. I'll come over to functions and let's create a new one by clicking on the plus icon. So I'm gonna call this one end game, just like that. So let's come back into my event graph, and I'll highlight all of these, Control C, and paste it into end game just like that with Control V. So now I can hook it up like this. And then instead, if I compile, instead of having to use all these nodes, we created a little bit of modular design right there. I could delete it and replace it with this function, which is a node in itself. So you could create your own nodes, and they're called functions. So I'll Control C, and then let's delete all these right here, and Control V. But you'll notice that these weren't the same. I can always double click on my function to jump into it, because this one right here should be checked on and off depending on the location. So we need to expose this parameter of this node within our function. And we could do that by dragging out from our function and letting go just like that. So now that will create a new variable right there called lost game. And if I compile, save, and actually let me double click right here, just to organize my graph a little bit more and jump into a vec graph, we can see that we exposed that part of our node group. So within here, of course, did we lose game? No, because this is the win check. But right here, did we lose game? We did, just like that. So now if I press play, we can see that our game is still working just fine. So I lost right there, and I didn't lose right there. So that's functions at a very, very quick glance. We can make functions even more complicated depending on what we need. So we just took a couple of nodes and we combined them all into one node. That's also reusable. So when you create a functions, you can just drag it always from here and use this end game node as many times as you would like. So I'm going to delete that. And it's important to know that that's not the only way to create a function. We also can just highlight whatever nodes you want to turn into a function, right click, and come down to collapse to function. So that's another way of creating a function. So now if we press play, our game is pretty much done. We see we have a counter, and that counter counts down. And if I'm unable to hit all the targets in time, then I lost the game. If I press restart, then I win the game if I am able to hit it before that timer goes down to 0. So, you know, this seems pretty fun, but there's just one issue, and that is when I hit a target, nothing happens. My ball just bounces off of it, and that's pretty boring. So let's add some effects, some physics effects to our target to make it feel a lot better. I can see that we don't have our target blueprint open right now, so I'm going to jump back into my map, select my target, and press Ctrl and E to open it up just like this. So after all of this functionality plays, and then we add the score, I want to enable physics. So I'm going to drag from the target, let go, and now we have our target static mesh. So I'm going to drag from this, and let's enable our physics by going set, simulate physics, and setting that to true. So now if I press play and I hit a target, we can see that that target is simulating physics. So I want to test this out right now. So I'm going to go back into my game mode, and within the time, instead of 300, let's make this 1000. That's how we have a little bit more time to see what the physics is doing. So let's go into our target. If we hit a target, it just falls, and that's about it. It looks pretty boring. So let's add some impulse to these targets. That's how it feels like when I hit it with a ball, then that ball will push the target back just a little bit. And we could do that by adding in an impulse. So I'm going to drag from target. Let's go add impulse, just like this. And then I'm going to plug it up like that, hover over the wire, and bring it down. So right now, this is asking for a 3 vector. Essentially, you could think of a vector as a direction. So we want to get the direction at which the ball is hitting our static mesh. So we can get that direction of the ball hitting our mesh by dragging from hit, and we're going to go break. So break hit result, and then within the drop down, I'm going to click right here, and I specifically want the normal. So I'm going to drag the normal all the way up into here, and now we are getting that direction. Also, I can collapse this now just like that. I'm going to go ahead and let's double click on this wire just to bring it down to make my screen just look a little bit nicer. And there's one issue, and that is this impulse isn't strong enough. So if I press play, then hit it, we can see that there was barely any impulse whatsoever. So let's increase the strength of this impulse. First, I'm going to check on velocity change, and then I'm going to drag from this reroute node once again and press times. And we're going to multiply this by a float. So right now we're multiplying this by another vector. To turn this into a float, I want to right click on this input right here, and then go to convert pin and click on float. So I found a float of 1000 to be pretty good. So now this will be 1000 times what the current impulse actually is. So, and I think I can get rid of that reroute node. So I'll just reconnect it like this and delete that empty reroute node. So now if I press play and let's hit this back, we can see that those targets are flying backwards and the physics is looking a lot nicer. It's a lot more satisfying to hit those targets. So now I'm going to give these targets a nice spin. So let's go to drag off a target once again, specifically from the reroute node, and let's go to add impulse. Actually, we're going to add a torque. So torque will add in a spin. And let's go by radians, because I found radians to look nicer and we don't have to use as large as numbers as we do with degrees. So I'm going to move it up like this. Let's double click on the wire. Let's move it down. So now let's play with our torque settings right here. By default, there won't be any torque being added. So let's just add it to our x-axis. And I'm going to make this one, let's make it 10,000. And for acceleration change, I'm going to turn this on. That's how we actually do see a massive torque increase or a spin increase. And then I'm going to come into our target game and I'm just going to go turn off, hold down Alt and break the connection right there. That's how we don't have a counter counting down, so we can actually see what is happening without having to worry about finding the timer right here. And now let's press play. And then we'll notice that when I press or when I shoot one, we can see that we do have a spin. We have a spin right there. But then we have an issue, and that is when we have a target that's facing this direction in our world, we see that it spins backward like that. And I believe we can see that again right here. So this target right here is basically facing within the y-axis. And if you remember, we are rotating within the x-axis. Now we are rotating within the x-axis, not of our local space, not of our blueprint right here, but we're rotating in the x-axis of our world space. So if we have targets, and let me move these right here, if we have targets that are facing our y-axis, then it will rotate within the world x-axis, which will then just rotate it this way like that. So that's why we are getting that weird spinning. If we press play and we shoot it right there, you see that spins backward, kind of like a top. So we need to fix that, and the way we're going to fix that is that I'm going to come through, and instead of rotating or adding a rotation to the world x-axis, instead we're going to go up here and let me click on my world icon. We're going to be adding it to the local x-axis. So specifically this one right here, which will fly our targets back like this. And that's exactly how I want it to be. So let's go into our BP_target. And to get the pretty much the local x-axis right here, we want the forward vector. What the forward vector will do is that it's a direction that's pointing in this way within our blueprint. And you'll notice that if we rotate along that way, that is exactly what we want. So let's go into our event graph for our BP_targets. And I'm going to grab my targets and let's drag from this and let's get forward vector. And then I'm going to plug it up just like this. And actually, let me go do a times real quickly. So let's multiply this, right click again, convert to pin. We're going to make it float. And let's make this 2000 just like that, because I found 2000 to be a good strength. And then I'm going to organize everything. And now if I press play and if I shoot these two right here, we see that we aren't getting that issue of them rotating along the world x-axis. So here, here, and here, everything seems to be working. So I'm going to come back into my game mode, and within here, let's hook it up just like that. So that's how we get back our timer. And right now we have a time of 1000. Let's press play. Let's see how quick that is. Okay, let's maybe decrease this just a little bit. Let's make this 500. And I think another thing I'm going to do is let's come into first person example map. And I really like this first person shooter template that Epic Games has provided, because if we, let's say, if we shoot a target and then the ball bounces off of that target, there's a chance that it could hit another target. So then we can hit two targets with one shot, which is really fun. So I'm just going to massively increase the size of this one right here. That's so we can actually see what I mean by bouncing it off multiple times. So now if I, let's see where our time is. So right now it's at 500. Let's press play. Let's see if that's a good time. Okay, that seems fine. So now if I, let's say, bounce this off like that, or let's try right here. Okay. Yeah, just like that. So with one shot, we were able to get 3 targets at once. And it looks like 500 is a good time. It's not too hard, but it's also challenging still. So if I press restart, we can see that we won right there. So our game is almost done. This is really fun, but there is one glitch right now. So let's play our game and let's move around just for a second. And you notice that if we're moving and we end the game, I let go of my keyboard and we are still moving. And that's exactly what I don't want to happen. So let's press escape. And now we're going to debug. So I know it has something to do with endgame. So I can jump into the endgame function. And then right here, let's add in a new node. So let's drag it off from this one right here. And let's make this set ignore move input. I'm going to select this one and then I'm going to check new move input. So this will reset our inputs. That's so we aren't running around. And now if I press play, we can see that if I'm walking around and we end the game, our player just stops, and that's exactly what we need. And congratulations, pat yourself on the back. We just finished our first game in Unreal Engine. And that is the very basics of how to program a game in Unreal Engine using blueprints. So now that we have a nice game, there is one more issue, and that is the environment. The world our game is located inside is very boring. It's just a default first-person map, which is a bunch of cubes. So now we're going to go over how we can take that game that we created and migrate it over into a nice environment and make full use of all the new features of Unreal Engine, including Lumen. So this part is going to be really fun. But before you begin, I highly recommend, if you are a complete beginner, to watch my other beginner tutorial that focuses more on level design and environment design. So you should see that right here. So there should be a link, and you need to watch that tutorial and just get a basic idea of how to create environments and lighting in Unreal Engine before we can continue. So with that being said, let's jump into how we can take our game and put it into a nice Unreal Engine 5 environment. So luckily for us, Epic Games has provided a bunch of free environments, a bunch of free projects that we can use and move our game into. That's how we actually have a nice environment to play from. So, but unfortunately, a lot of these environments are still in Unreal Engine 4. So we're going to go over how we can take an Unreal Engine 4 project and update it to Unreal Engine 5. So if I want to come into the Learn tab, I want to scroll all the way down here, and I specifically want, let's do this environment right here. So if you want to follow along with this tutorial, you could download this, or you could download anything else right here. You can even, if your computer is strong enough, use the Unreal Engine 5 demo right there. So if you really want to, you can use Unreal Engine 5 demo. But for now, I'm just going to stick with, if I scroll all the way down here, this one right here. So the Sun Temple. So I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to create a project. You want to choose a location. I'm just going to save this on my desktop, and then press Create. Once your project has been created, you want to navigate to where your new project is, and simply double click on it. And within the project folder, before we double click on the U project, you want to right click, go to switch Unreal Engine version, and change it from 4.26 to 5. So now if we double click on it, this will convert it from an Unreal Engine 4 project all the way into an Unreal Engine 5 project. And there we go. Immediately like that. So it is literally that easy to go from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5. Now, this is also super performant. If I press Ctrl and H, we can see that we're getting a consistent 120 frames per second. And this is because we are not using any of the new Unreal Engine 5 features. So this is why this entire level is so performant right now, is because this is running as if it is within Unreal Engine 4. So this is one thing that is really getting people hung up on, is that people think that just because it's Unreal Engine 5, you can't run really performant projects. You can. You just need to disable a lot of the extra Unreal Engine 5 features, such as Lumen, which will then make your project as performant as it was within Unreal Engine 4. So now that we have a nice environment, let's bring our game into this environment. So of course, we're going to be using the migration tool. So I want to go and let's copy the location of the content folder of this new environment project. And then within right here, let's go into content drawer, and let's right click on first person BP, because I want to move this folder. And then if I click on migrate, it will find all the assets that are being referenced by the blueprints that make up my game that we just created. And we're going to click on OK. So now let's navigate to where our new content folder is. Let's press enter, and we can see it's Sun Temple content, and press select folder. So now we have our game within our new world. And if I press Control and space, we can see first person BP right there. So I'm going to press G to hide all these editor widgets. That's so we only see what our environment looks like. I'm also going to press Control and H to hide that FPS counter right there. So now let's go up into our windows and let's bring in our world settings. Because remember, in order to play the game that we just created and migrated over, we need to come over to game mode, and we need to select the game mode which we've been creating our game within, and that is GM_target game. So now that we have our game mode selected, if I press play, this should automatically work. And as we can see, it does work, but it's 0 out of 0 because we need to add in some targets. So I'm going to press escape, and let's add in some targets into our world. So I'm going to come here and let's go into blueprints, target, and I can just drag it out and start placing targets all around my map. So let's add a target right here. And then let's hold down Alt. Let me add one right here, kind of like move it up. Also, I'm going to turn off snapping right now since snapping is on by default. Let's move this one just like this, kind of facing down. Then we can move one all the way over here and move it just like this. Also move this into the corner. And the lighting looks really bad right now because we are using the lighting from Unreal Engine 4. We will update this to Unreal Engine 5 in just a bit. And then I think I will leave it like there for now. So if I press play, we can see that now I have 3 targets. So I have to go and shoot. And it looks like my left click isn't working right now. So let's go see what the issue is. If I jump in a first person character, we will see that the issue, if I zoom in right here, is this fire. And I believe it's also... Actually, no, it's not jump. So it's just the fire button right here. And that's because this fire button was set within the project settings. And since this is a new project, by default, this fire button won't work. But that's okay. We can replace this event with the left click. Because remember, we are just left clicking a fire. So let's go event mouse, left mouse button right here. Let's delete this. Actually, I'm going to hold on control. Let's drag the wire, bring it into left mouse button just like this, and delete it right there. So now if I compile, and it looks like we also have another issue. So input action VR, we don't need this because we aren't using VR. So I'll just delete that anyway. So now if I compile, looks like my blueprint is working. So let's come back into Sun Temple. Let's press play. And we can see we are now playing our game. I can hit that. Let's try to hit. Okay, well that didn't work because it looks like that there was a collision volume that was blocking it. And also when we press restart, we were brought back to our original map. We need to go where we programmed the restart button, and that is within our end screen right here. So let's go into our end screen. Let's go into graph, and right here for open level, instead of this one right here, which is first person example, let's pick on Sun Temple. So now if we press play, and if we wait for the counter to fall all the way down to 0, and then we press restart, we restart within the Sun Temple, which is exactly what we want. And we can see that when I try to hit this right here, that this angel is blocking it. So we can always fix this by, let's open up this angel. So I'm going to click on it right there and press Control and E, which will open up this statue. And then if I scroll all the way down, we can change. Let's go complex collision complexity. We're going to set to use complex collision as simple. So now if we press play, I should be able to just fire through it just like that. So now that's working. This is working. And we almost got it right there. So let's restart. Okay, looks like I won because one of my balls must have ricocheted and hit the target that was right behind me, so that's pretty funny. It's important to know that we can view our level's collision by coming up to lit, scrolling down to player collision, and selecting it just like that. So if you ever notice that maybe you think a static mesh is blocking your projectiles, you want to go ahead and double check that your collision is set up all right by going into the player collision mode. So for example, this statue here, if we open it up again, and then I'm going to reset to what it was originally, our statue's collision looked like this. So obviously it was going to try to block our projectiles. So we changed it. That's why we're just going to use the actual geometry of our statue by going to use complex collision as simple for our collision, which fixed it. We can go back to our normal view mode by coming up here and clicking on lit. Or we can use Alt-4, which is the shortcut. So now it is finally time to convert this level you see right here to an Unreal Engine 5 level, and use Unreal Engine 5's new lighting system called Lumen. So it's very, very important to know. That won't be explained this entire process since this tutorial was for programming. If you want to watch environment design, I highly recommend you check out this video where I will actually go over what we are doing. But within this video, I'm going to go over how we can quickly use Lumen within this world and stop using Unreal Engine 4's lighting. So first off, what I want to do is that I want to get rid of our light maps. In case you don't know what a light map is essentially the baked lighting, the baked shadows. So if I move, let's say this pillar, then the lighting on our pillar disappears because we are only using baked lighting right there. So that's an issue with static lighting, is that our objects are static. So let's change everything to movable, but first let's get rid of that light map. So I'm going to come into world settings, and within light map settings, within the drop down, I'm going to click on force no pre-computed lighting, click OK, and then come up here to build and click on build all levels. So now that lighting has completely disappeared and our level looks absolutely terrible. And we also get a bunch of preview words on our shadow right now, and that's indicating that our lights are set to static. So we want to change all of the lights you see in our world to movable. So I'm going to come up into my world outliner, And let's go within the drop down. Let's see where all my lights are. I'm going to select this point light right here, scroll all the way down, hold down shift, and select that entire row of point lights. And then within my detail settings, I'm going to change it from static to movable, just like that. And keep in mind, I go into depth what all these different lighting settings are doing, the differences between static and movable lights within my 5-hour course. So please make sure you check that out. And then we're going to drag all the way down. Let's see if we have some more lights. And it looks like we have Windows Skylight Spotlight right here. So I'll select this one, hold on shift, select that one, and then change this to, let's change it to movable. And then let me check if we have a directional light. We do have a directional light. I'm going to select this one and set that to movable. So now we get rid of that preview text, but now my world looks absolutely terrible because we don't get any bounce lighting. So this is the part where we're going to activate Lumen, because right now this project doesn't have Lumen activated since we updated it from an Unreal Engine 4 project. So to activate Lumen, we need to come to settings, then project settings, and within here, let's scroll all the way down to rendering, and then we're going to scroll down and we see that we have dynamic global illumination method is set to none. In the drop down, we're going to set that to Lumen, just like that. And then it says Lumen reflections are designed to work with Lumen global illumination and have been automatically enabled, which is also what we want. And we can see that and generate mesh distance field has also been enabled, and that's what we want also. I'm going to go ahead and let's save everything. And then we need to restart. So I'm going to close my project and open it back up. So when we open up our project again, we can see that you might see some shaders compiling right here in the bottom right hand corner. And I'm going to press update and press cancel. So now we are using Lumen within our project, and we can tell we are because if I press Control and H, we can see that my frames have decreased just a bit. Also now, if I move this pillar, we no longer get that weird lighting because everything you see here is completely movable. All the lights you see here are dynamic. For example, if I grab this light right here, and then if I move it around, you can see that lighting change dynamically. So this was very hard to do in Unreal Engine 4, and now our lighting is up to date. This is an Unreal Engine 5 map, and we don't need all these reflection captures right here. So I can come up and let's select all the reflection captures, hold down shift, and I'm just going to delete them like that. So now that we have our world updated, I'm also going to go into our post-process volume. So I think, do we have a main, or we have a couple of main post-process volumes. So I'll type in post-process. I think I'll delete these 3 right here and then go into the global post-process and scroll down. Let's see if we have, okay, if infinite extend unbound is checked on. I want that to happen. And please keep in mind within the other beginner tutorial, we go over what post-process volume is. And then I'm going to go to exposure. Let's change this to manual. And then let's bring this from, let's say 12. Okay, let's keep this at 12 for now. So now if I press play, we can see that we have our level. I try to hit that, that, and that. So we win, and then we restart, and we just go around. We can play our level. We can shoot our balls at different locations. And let's actually refine this right now. So we have 3 targets in the main room. Then let's add, hold down Alt, let's add some targets over here. That's how it's going to lead the player from the main room right here into the outdoor room. So we have a target at the back of the angel statue. And then let's have another target all the way up here. So this will probably be the hardest target to get through. So I can decrease it like this and move it right there. Actually, let's make it pretty big. So that's how it kind of fills that hole. So that's how when we hit it, it's just going to fall into our world. So it's going to look pretty funny. And then we can add a couple more targets. So let's add some targets out here. That's how our player has to look outside the window and get some targets out here. And of course, we're going to have to raise the time significantly because that would be way too hard. And then I'd say this is it. Let's see where our player start is. Our player start is right here. Let's actually start the player off at the very back here. So we're going to start from this room you see. And then we're going to come into it. So let's move it like this. And then let's add in one more target just right here. That's how we have a first target for the player to shoot. That's how they understand what is happening within this game. Let's move it back just a bit. And now let's go into our game mode. within the event graph, actually within time. We're going to change this from 500 to, let's make this, okay, so 500 is too quick. Let's make this 5,000. So now if we press play, let's see if we can beat the game we just created. So we press play, we need to shoot that. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we can see that we're out of 8 right now. Just hit it right there. We need those 2. And finally, that one all the way up there. And now we know it's a glitch because let's go into lit and player collision. And we can see that that collision is completely wrong. So I'm going to select this. And then let's press Control and E to open up that mesh. And I'm going to do the exact same thing that we did on the statue. And that is scroll down here. And let's change it from project default to use complex collision as simple. So then we're going to save it just like that. And then I notice we have another issue. And that is if I go into my user interface, so WBP_UI, I need to move this time just a bit like that. So we have some more space so we can actually see what that time is, because my time was kind of coming outside of the user interface just a bit. So I'll compile, save. Let's press Alt and 4 to jump back into our main view. And now if I press into, let's go into our game mode. Let's change the time because 5,000 was a little bit too much. Let's half this. So let's make this 2,500. And now let's play and let's see if we can beat our game. So 1, 2. Slowly, we're starting to make it. If I can actually hit that one. And we beat the game. So that is how you create your first game within Unreal Engine 5. Alrighty, I hope you enjoyed this video and you got something out of it. If you did, make sure to subscribe for a lot more videos in the future. I have a lot of cool videos planned for this YouTube channel. Also, if you want to get more into depth in Unreal Engine, learn some more of the fundamentals, I have a masterclass you can check out, link in the description below. So with all that being said, farewell.